was a Srila Prabhupada. Actually, scientifically, objectively, he persevered when he could have gone back. He had a stroke. Um, didn't know anybody in a strange country. Went down into a coal mine to see what the United States was like in Butler, Pennsylvania. So there was a priest there, and the priest said, if you don't worship Lord Jesus, you'll go to hell. And the miner said, well, what's hell like? And the priest said, well, it's down in the ground, and it's cramped, and it's hot. And they said, well, that's our everyday working. So we don't mind going there. So the priest said, well, there's no newspapers in hell. So Prabhupada said, yes, Krishna is all attractive, so that's what we have to do, is find out how to attract people. So Jamuna and I, it was not an arranged marriage. We were actually friends before we became devotees. It was a strange meeting because I was in the civil rights movement based on Gandhi's peaceful nonviolence. I was getting beaten up and put in jail for my beliefs. And so there was a person who I knew in the civil rights movement who was a Black Panther. And an Earth Mother in San Francisco said, you have to meet this woman. And when somebody says you have to meet this person, that usually works out. Man, woman, whatever. So this Black Panther was kind of a hustler, and he had a saxophone case, and we're going to meet Jamuna. And she comes into the room. It's where Malati Samarshunda were living. And she put 2 pieces of incense into one little pinhole in the wall. And it was like a thunderbolt. Oh. And she apparently felt that about me. So I say to the Black Panther, so you're playing the saxophone? And he said, no, I'm just taking food out of people's refrigerators. So I talked black talk to him. I said, this chick's opened my nose and pulled my coat and don't take any grits out of her refrigerator.
Right.
And he left and we spoke all night. And you know, with any relationships, you really want to see what baggage there is. You want to see if you're friends, if you have the same ideals like we do. So we talked all night, and I moved in with them, and I had a dog from Mexico, Ketal, and Samarshunda had a dog. I like that there's dogs here. Then it's a sign of a good ashram. You know? Yudhisthira wouldn't go to heaven without his dog. So then, and she was a great cook. She made these pasties. She from Butte, Montana, and she made these things that miners ate, where you can. It had a handle of crust that you didn't eat. They're called pasties, and she knew how to cook. We moved up to Rockport, California, a ghost logging town. 7 people lived in a redwood forest town with a defunct port, and she cooked on a potbelly stove, and And we had blackberry bushes in the front yard, and it cost $35 for a 7-room house back then.
The rent, right?
Yeah. Then we got dog napped back to San Francisco by the devotees. It was good though. So now, you know the story that she goes to Janaki's wedding to help out. You all probably know the story. And she knew how to cook, but she wasn't sure about this old man. She was like street smart and who is this guy? And she touched like that, and he said, "Go wash your hands." So, then an hour later she said, "Swamiji, can I go smoke a cigarette?" "Go wash your hands." 99% of the people, when they cook, they taste. She tastes. He said, "No, we don't taste when we cook for Krishna." And then she fell in love with him. But just to show you Prabhupada's time, place, circumstance, open-minded, he's teaching us these fundamentals. At first, we didn't see him. He was translating, but finally, we got to see him 3 times a week. And he called me in about a camera, a photograph. And I was in his presence and feeling good. And then he asked about a camera, and then my foot was in the door, and I found an excuse every day. And then they said, Govinda Dasi and Harsha Rani said, "Don't let Gurudas in anymore." In every family, every ashram, there's always a rule enforcer. And it was Harsha Rani. Her name sounds harsh. So Prabhupada, the Swamiji's with me, and he smells some pakoras in the kitchen. And he gets up, and they're cooling, and he takes a pakora, and he had a way of not touching his lips. He did it in the perfect order. On the way to Canada, Sam Sundar Mukunda and I had a whole jar of gulab jamuns. In the 60s, they took him, thought it was drugs, they analyzed the gulab jamun. So he had a way of, so he takes one of the pakoras and threw it in his mouth, and Harsha Rani said, "You can't do that." And his answer was he took another pakora. She said, "When we cook for Krishna, we don't taste, we don't eat." He said, "Who has given you these rules?" She said, "You have." So his answer was, you see, time, place, and circumstance is one of our caveats on how we can understand and be flexible when we need to in Krishna consciousness. So, he came to San Francisco, and at the time, there was just a few devotees in New York, and in San Francisco, there were no Mridungas, no cartels, no movement, no books, a few books. And we had the Swami. Would you rather have Krishna or the phalanx of armies? Well, we'll take Krishna. So Swamiji was there, spoon feeding us, teaching us everything. Not too much at a time. He was on the mountain, seeing us climb up. He knew it, and he knew how to interact with everyone perfect. There was a totem pole. Like here, there's many indigenous people, and the totem poles are the history and history of this tribe. And so Haridas put a totem pole in the temple to the right. picture of Lord Jesus. He just told me. And he sat on the altar playing a bongo drum. There's no Madonna. And so we were all contributing in our ways, and there was a family, and we were growing and building, and we loved the Swamiji. And Jamuna took a calligraphy course with the top calligrapher of the Lloyd Reynolds. He's famous at Reed College, where Steve Jobs would go to get food at the Krishna Temple from Reed College. So we would have rousing kirtans, but we didn't get to see the Swamiji at first. It's like the classic disciple at the gate, waiting to be purified until you get to see the master. Now, even when I did finally get to see him with the camera, some past things were coming into my consciousness, and I asked, we had access to our guru, and we could ask him things, and I said, these are unwanted things, they're coming into my consciousness and seeming to go out. What is that about? And he said, this is the purification process. And then he explained in simple ways that there's first the foundations, the rules and regulations. He joked with somebody earlier, he said, if I told you all the rules and regulations, you wouldn't join. And what's there a part of you? Then the spontaneous aspect of Krishna consciousness happens. And again, time, place, and circumstance. We're on a walk. No, we're in the Kumbh Mela. Prabhupada was like an emir, Bedouin chief in his tent. And Hansaduta was having trouble in Germany, and he said, why isn't anybody helping? It wasn't a matter of airfare, it was a matter of God, brothers, in trouble, go help. Some people left. And he's there sitting there, and he says, how do you know Krishna's God? And I said, well, you told us, Prabhupada. He said, they will just say, I'm an old man. Someone said, well, the Bhagavad Gita says. They will just say it's a book. You know Krishna's God by the ecstasy. That makes sense. Why are we doing this? There's some ecstasy keeping us going. Shastra, Seva, and Sadhana. I thought, that's great. And then he said, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. He really loved English proverbs from Scottish Church College and the British Raj and all of that. So next year I happened to be in Philadelphia, and it was so funny the way people would vie. They'd elbow each other out, Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, to get close to Prabhupada on the walk. See, I had the trick. I had the tape recorder, so if I wanted to be next to him, Gurudas has the tape recorder. Sometimes there was no tape recorder. So I'm back there. I didn't have to do that. And he says, how do you know Krishna's God? And so everybody's trying not to step on him. And okay, somebody said, well, you told us. He said, they will just say, I'm an old man. So I get from the back, I say, you know Krishna's God by the ecstasy you feel, the proof of the puddings and the eating. He says, no, Bhagavad Gita says so. Because there were scholars on the wall. So he's teaching us, he's spoon feeding us, and then there was a Krishna in a store, Katamashi. And I'd go every day and say, can we have Krishna for our temple? And they'd say, no, no. And so one day they said, you can have your Krishna for $35. So I go in the street. Change your guru, by the way. When there's intuition or following your heart, do it. It saved my life times. And this was a chance. There's a lot of times you'll see how Jacob Guru gave me intelligence. You can save our lives. So I went into the street and said, my father's in jail, give me $35. My best friend's in jail. My little child, he's blue. And $35 came. I took him to the park. Where's that book? This is my latest book. And there's lots of pictures of what right there, Jamuna. That's why I bought it. The more you walk. But there's a beautiful picture of Kartamashi that I took him to the park. He was pale.
Oh, wow.
And we fed him. And you could see the before and after pictures. So now,
How did he change after the?
because we gave him love and his cheeks were rosy instead of pale. And he really seemed to put on weight. I mean, I don't know where those photos are, but Swamiji saw them. Yes, yes. So now, Prabhupada, the Swami said, see, he never told us to bow down. He was so humble. His trunk was his desk. And he said, well, now we have little captain here, so now I'll get off the altar. There's a seat called the Vyasasan, which is our Parampara line. So the first night of the Vyasasan, and you've heard this story twice. So
Never fresh. Every time you tell it, it just gets more ecstatic.
So Prabhupada's on the Vyasasan, and Govinda Dasi's father was from Texas in the United States. And Texas people were very arrogant because they had a lot of oil and riches, and they were bigger than any other state before Alaska, of course. So he goes right up to Prabhupada, the Swami at the time. Well, the Patels from Gujarat were coming, the whole clan, the ambassador Dar, the Indian ambassador, young people were coming off psychotropic trips to have breakfast at the temple. It was part of the community. So Govinda Dasi's father goes right up to the altar. Now, it didn't help that the chief of the Patel had a gold tooth, and there was a light going off the gold tooth to Govinda Dasi's father. It didn't help the mood, you know. So he goes up and he's right up to Swamiji. Why? Why does my daughter have to have an Indian name? So the Patels go up there to see the wisdom, and Govinda Dasi's father is surrounded by the Patels. He felt like General Custer. And he's going like this, and Prabhupada's so clever, so he says, "You do not like Indians?" Yeah, I like Indians all right. But why does my daughter have to have an Indian name? He said, if she's happy, why do you object? and then Mrs. Govinda Dasi. So there saw many parents who didn't understand with that same thing. Because parents really want their children to be happy. That's one of the first things. So then we hear banging on the wall. Boom, boom. Well, I knew next door was called the Peaside Ice Cream Parlor. And in it was a group called the Diggers from Ireland. They fed people, and we fed people, and so we were neighbors. But the Hells Angels were there, and they're a notorious motorcycle gang. And one day, Jerry Garcia hands me a badge of the Grateful Dead and says, "Your security. Your job is to keep the Hells Angels from trashing the stage."
What year was that?
What year is this? No, 66, 67. So, I knew it was the Hells Angels. Now, I even gave them tactics from the civil rights that if the police raid you, take out a movie camera, and the police will go away. I was invited to Quebec. The rebels in Quebec in 60-something to teach them tactics of protest from the civil rights movement. And the person who greeted us in Montreal, his mother, just insisted that we race from Trois-Rivières to Quebec. We didn't want to race. She'd come back. At any rate, I diverged.
That's before you were devoted, right?
Yes. So Prabhupada says, Gurudas, what is that? Now, why me? Tomorrow Krishna's there, he can sell Eskimo refrigerators. Why me? He took me on television. I'm honored, really, that he took me to Lalit Prasad Thakur, to the Vice President of India, to the signing of Jubu. He took me. Thank you. So, okay, Gurudas, what is that? Well, I knew it was the Hells Angels, so I go out there. So I knock on the door, and this huge guy with a swastika etched in his cheek says, "Yeah, what do you want?" Well, I saw he had a knife, and I had my bead bags, and he had boots, and I had my sandals, you know.
He had his knife on his belt or something.
Yeah. So now I would say, could you party less hardy? But then I just said, well, Swamiji going to talk, and could you possibly... There's a jazz term, knock yourself out. So I didn't say that because he was banging on the wall. So he said, well, I was wondering why he was banging on. He says, I was banging on the wall, man, because of your singing. In other words, he liked the kirtan. And he said, your guru is really deep. So he was quiet when Prabhupada spoke. They were great days. And people were starting to come, and we had brahmacharis, the great Jayananda Thakur. He's spoon feeding us. Malati got a stove from the Grateful Dead that you could cook chapatis on. She was able to get anything. We were a good team. Jamuna, delightful as usual. We had a good marriage. So he's teaching us the basics. So one day, he says, it's Lord Chaitanya's appearance day, so go into the temple and chant japa, chant kirtan, and here's a manuscript of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, unpublished. And he said, go spend all day in the temple, read, chant, and fast. But as a kindly father, he says to Mukunda, if you have trouble fasting, here's some rock candy. That's how kind he was. He very rarely chastises, and if he did, I'll show you an example. So one day, he had an apartment above the temple. He's looking out there, the window, and Malati was in front of the temple, and there was a man delivering dairy products. And the man went into the store, and Malati, she runs to the truck and takes a whole flat of butter, and she's like that, and she comes in the temple with it. And we put all the butter in the... So there was only one Dodi and one Sari in the whole movement back then. So the Swamiji wants to see you. See, he was seeing it, and he liked Charlie Chaplin movies, so it was all pantomime, but he could tell she was stealing the butter. So he calls her up, and she said, oh, Swamiji wants to see me. And then he said, so you have stolen the butter? She felt like protoplasmic molten butter falling in. We should not steal. It's other people's property. You should treat other people's property like stealing. But if you have to steal, then steal butter, because Krishna's called Makinshore, and then it's scary. So he chastised and then forgave. So then he says, go into the temple and chant all day. So about noontime, the great Jayananda Thakur and the devotee named Jivananda, who joined after he tasted prasadam, he joined. So they go like this to me, let's get out of here. And I said, Swamiji said we should stay in the temple all day. But you see, it was like two Anandas, Jivananda, Jayananda against one Das. So, okay, we go out and we go chanting. There was an apartment I gave him, which was better than the one above the temple. Arcade floors. And we're chanting before him, and he comes to the window, and he goes like this. And I said, I told you, Anandas, he's telling us to go back into the temple, and we go down the hill, crestfallen, and the tender runs out and he says, Swamiji wants to see you. Uh-oh. It's like going to the principal's office. He told us to stay in the temple. I told you, Anandas. We go up there, he's got his oceanic smile, and he said, Lord Chaitanya has given you the intelligence to chant inside the temple and outside, and this is called Harinam Sankirtan. So now do this every day, and we did. So that's the origin of that. So then, the origin of the Ratha Yatra was Malati didn't learn, and we thought everything from India was holy. All these kirtas from India. These two little brass pots are from India. See, they would go before the Jamuna River and do the oblations in the Gayatri with these two little pots. And the man would come back and where's all these pots are there, and everybody had them. So the next day, he put a little clay ball in his pot and went to do his Gayatri, and he comes back and he sees everybody put clay balls in their pots. They thought it was the new religion. Sadhu Singh. So she went to an import store And she didn't pay. It was called the 5-finger discount. And she goes to the Swami and says, "Is this from India?" And he bows down and says, "You brought Krishna. I told you all about it." He said, "Oh, there's some other ones." He said, "I think there's a white, maybe a green, a yellow. Go get them." So she does the 10-finger discount. Simashinda carved. Can you carve these? Now, New York wanted Swamiji back. So I said to Simashinda, carve these, Lord Jagannath Subhadra, carve them really slow. Slow. But he walked half a mile to speed Simashinda up. Talking about the Swami here, there's a Pell-Mell cigarette at the base of the, he takes his cane and he goes, whap, to the cigarette. Don't let this get in your way of Krishna consciousness. So he sped him up. So now, Harsharani says, Jamuna and I were living with Samashinda and Malati, and the dog from Mexico that was given to me for being painted, my portrait is the payment, and Samashinda's little dog Ralph were living there. So Harsharani, the rule enforcer, says if you live together, you have to get married. Oh. So I was a hippie. I didn't want to get married. But by that time we were together, and she actually found me in a hidden grove in Golden Gate Park, and she knew where it was, and she proposed to me. And so we knew a Buddhist monk, a Franciscan monk, and Prabhupada, and we said, okay, Swamiji will marry us. So we go to him and say, we'd like to get married, Swamiji. And he said, but first you must get initiated. Oh. I'm not sure if I want to surrender yet. A born-again Christian shows up challenging the whole thing, testing me. But he was so obnoxious, he pushed me closer to Christianity. So, when do you want us to get initiated? Tomorrow. So we get there, and Shaman Devi hired Gurudas' wife to was being initiated with us. And Janaki used oleo marsh, not ghee, and fruit box wood, not real wood. Box is the whole fruit. And the fire sputtered. And then with his lotus hands, he built a fire. We used to feed people, and the Krishna temple was known that you could have breakfast and the love feasts, not Sunday feasts, love feasts. Love feasts. Well, and so there are lots of people there at the fire ceremony just liking the fire. And this phenomena of the Swami building a fire in a storefront with a totem pole. So the next day, so we got initiated, and so when do you want us to get married? Tomorrow. So we're getting married there, and there's a girl who wanted to marry Prabhupada. Well, we were considering ways to get his immigration, his green card. So somebody said, well, you could get married. He said, no, I'm sannyasi. Dayananda Nandarani wanted to adopt him, and he left. He said, "What are you doing with such an old child?" So we were trying to figure that out. And she wanted to marry, and she had a baby on her lap, and the baby's head was hitting the floor. And all the masculine people watching the fire started looking at her. And I'm looking, and Prabhupada's head is in Vaikuntha all the time, like royalty. And then he sees it, he says, "Pick up baby." And she was a mother, even though she was a space cadet, and she goes, "Look." So, then Prabhupada joked, he said, "We'll be strong baby," and everybody laughed. And it sputtered, and then it burst into flame, and he said, "That's your marriage. It'll sputter and then burst into flame, and the two of you are like three people in potency." He really encouraged us. So then we moved into Jayananda's place across from the Grateful Dead, and gave Prabhupada our apartment. And so San Francisco was becoming very popular, and we were part of the whole community, not just the hip young community, but ambassadors were coming, and the kirtans were long with all sorts of instruments, kettle drums, trumpets, violins, guitars, long, wonderful kirtans. And then he would spoon feed us Krishna Kali. He would do prayers on a chalkboard. We didn't have prayers. He taught us the Chaitanya prayers. We didn't. Things we take for granted today, maybe, we shouldn't, because it all started then, and we want it to be Navayogana, ever fresh. Even though we're doing the same things, it can be fresh, see? And that's the idea, because you're like a baby crying for Krishna. There's so many aspects of it, and so many arts and music, and any talent that Krishna gives you, give it back to him. Not something you don't want to do, it's natural. And he wanted these forms as an alternative. So there's many pastimes in San Francisco, but as you know, Prabhupada wanted something in London because it's the hub of the world, the middle of the world, and the British Raj had a connection with India, and Scottish Church College, all these things. So he wanted that, and so he asked. In 1941, Bhakti Siddhanta sent his 3 top sannyasis to London, and they found one disciple, and they didn't do very well, and they went back. And so that was another thing. He wanted to please his spiritual master. So he sent, instead of sannyasis, there were many back then, us to London. There were some brahmacharis, like Banavisa, Jayananda, Brother David, who started the Children of God cult. So it's really interesting, because in the Sunday love feasts, the brahmachari's pleasure was prasadam, and it was like a day off. It shouldn't be. We should greet people at the door, take care of their shoes, not just space out, but they did. So Jamuna put out 2 tarps, and there are people all the way out in the street. So Madhavisa and the brahmacharis were trying to smell what's in the pot, and then Jamuna opens the pots, and she decided she's going to do plates to everybody, starting out with the street. So the brahmacharis had to pass all the plates. They were yogis though. So the next week they go out in the street, and Jamuna feeds the people in the front. So we were doing I was doing talks of paintings of a collage story that Govindas and Gurslender did. And at that point, we had a ticket to go. We were on the way to London, and we stopped in Montreal. So as I said, the girls went first, and then we went with a jar of Galoshimas. And it was a bowling alley, and it was, see, back then, and you know, we're probably emulating that here today, the family atmosphere, the love and trust, building together, non-judgmental, no great positions, hierarchy this way, family. And that's what we had. So in Montreal, Hansadun and Himavati had a bowling alley, and the rooms were like just a curtain. And very welcoming. The next day, I was on a morning walk, and somehow or other I found Prabhupada's house. And I said, this is psychic. And he said, Krishna's grace. And so we were there, and it was Janmashtami and then Vyas Puja. And my theory was that Prabhupada would have come out in Janmashtami, but he didn't want to take attention away from Krishna, so he came out the next day. Yeah, most people look at me like I'm from Mars when I say that, but I don't understand. Some people get it, but... So it was Vyas Puja, and I had all the photos. And so a man says he said, Swamiji, I don't think they should bow down to you. And he said, well, as you're thinking they should not bow down to me, they're thinking you should. And this is democracy and majority rules. Without missing a beat. So then, I was sometimes like a real child before him. I mean, all the rasas, but sometimes I would say, I asked him, the issue of Bhakti Godhead had Lord Nrsimha on it. So I said, Swamiji, can we wear Lord Nrsimha masks on Harinam?
No.
He said, yes. And then he told the Charlie Chaplin story with Victorian language, that Charles Chaplin was at the ball dance and someone tore up his trailing coats, and he went into the private room and he tore his trailing coats all the way up, and then he went and danced, and Prabhupada imitated on the ball, and then everybody tore up their trailing cuts because they thought it was the new style, just like the Playboy. So that's his saying, yes, you can wear Lord Nrsimha. We never did, but he said we could. So he never broke from tradition, but he was ready to go outside the envelope and just do wonderful, adventurous, impossible. He sent me to the ambassador of the United States in Delhi. He said, Gurudas asked the ambassador to give us a house because of your American disciples. And it was a Sunday, so I go there and I go to his house, and the wife is there, and she said, go to the back. I go to the back, and she treated me like some kind of salesperson, get out. So I sit in the driveway, and he comes in and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and he wants me to ask you something. But your wife asked me to leave." And he said, "Oh, yeah." And he took me way into the backyard to his bhajan group here. Well, it was his man cave. Into his man cave. And he said, "Yeah, my wife's like that." And I said, "Well, our gurus asked that you're an ambassador, so could you please give us an apartment in your house?" And I said, "I'm not a realtor, I'm not an estate agent." So Prabhupada's plan B was that if you can give us a house that will pay for it in any currency of the world. That is his plan B. We were at a picnic the other day. It was so nice in Vancouver, but the first picnic we went with Prabhupada, somebody said, "Swamiji, there's ants on the prashadam." And I said, "That's all right, they won't eat very much." I'm in Calcutta, across from the pool, the pond, and Prabhupada said, "I have fooled them, Gurudas." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "The mosquitoes." I'm sitting on the floor and the mosquitoes rise. He was like a little kid. He was so proud and he fooled the mosquitoes. His eyes were So I said, another childlike question. I said, "Prabhupada, are there mosquitoes in Krishna Loka?" He said, "They don't bite, they sing." When I first got to India, it was heaven. I saw, it felt the time is slower. The blue hit my, it was warm, and I'm seeing cows and people walking by the road, dal wallows, and I'm wondering, it's pristine here, but why is the guy in the ambassador car honking the horn so much? Honk, honk, honk. So I saw dal wallows were walking, cows were. So a few years later, we were riding in the car in East Bengal, and the horn broke. And so the cows and the people weren't going off the road. It was dangerous. So Prabhupada says, "Give me my tali and give me my cane." And it was sort of like a musical comedy. "Give me my tali, give me my cane, give me my hat, give me my..." And it goes out the window and it goes bong bong, bong bong, bong bong, and the cows and the walla is going off the road. So then he hands it to the Koyananda Swami, and bong bong, and then he laughs. He said, "They'll think it's a American invention," and try to imitate. So we get to England from Montreal to New York. Now, Samashinda got arrested and $1,000 returned. And Prabhupada gave us $50 from someplace, out of like a magician. And he said, "Take this." And so we had Malathi Samashinda Saraswati went first and said, "We have $1,050. Okay, come on." They sent it back to me and Jamuna in Amsterdam, and we have $1,040, the bank to pick up. Sent it to Mukunda, we have $1,030. Come on. So now we're in the suburb. We had one name, two names. The doctor, where we stayed with him, and Allen Ginsberg, the poet, gave us the name of a member of parliament. And I got it, this comes later, but I was thinking of the story with Jamuna. It's just classic. So it goes a little bit ahead in the story, but I'm going to tell it now. this member of parliament turned out to be a spy for the KGB and the CID. And he lived in the church. We'd take him home drunk in the Krishna van. He was a character. He wrote that our temple was soundproofed. It wasn't. I'll tell that story later. We tried to get to meet him. We had a letter of introduction from Allen Ginsberg, but we couldn't because the secretaries in the House of Commons were very protective. So we heard that he was in the hospital for an eye exam. So we go there in Sam Mashinda's little red pickup truck with a crank. One day I was cranking and my doty was flying up in the air. Sam Mashinda loves that story. But it wasn't as strange as we only dealt with George Harrison, Jamuna, Sam Mashinda, McKinnon, because devotees can be a little arrogant or no social. There was a devotee on top of the Apple offices on a skylight watching the Beatles rehearse. And he falls through the skylight, and his devotee gets caught on the stars, and he lands at John Lennon's feet in his Brahmin underwear. And John says, "Oh, one of yours, eh, George?"
And he kept playing the whole time.
Yeah, this will be one of yours, eh, George? Because George took to it. Any rate, so now we heard Tom Dreberg is in the hospital. We went there. And Jamuna goes, and we're all there, but Jamuna goes, "Oh, Mr. Dreberg, we're so glad to meet you." And he starts shaking, and the hospital thing, the chart is going like this, and it starts to flatten like, and people are running in and reviving. Well, then we hear across the room, "I'm Mr. Dreberg." It was the wrong guy. So then, like a cartoon, we go boom, 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 boom. And she goes, "Oh, Mr. Dreberg." And we brought tapes for him to listen, and he actually supported us. I'm going to tell this one story, and then I'm going to wind it up for tonight. I don't have to, but to show how bold we were. As you know, Krishna, Yudhisthira never lied. He did lie one time?
One time.
Okay, I want to know about that. But anyway, he was known for not lying. And Krishna said, "Tell them, Ashwatthama the elephant." Okay, he didn't lie. He said Ashwatthama the elephant, and Krishna blew the concept.
But he said Ashwatthama, the elephant.
He didn't lie.
He just said it very,
Oh, thank you.
very silent.
But he did take his dog into heaven. I love it. Anyway. And then when Krishna turned into Abhimanyu and was obnoxious before Radharani's mother, and then he turned into Krishna, "Oh, you should be more like Krishna." So he could trick. So we said, okay. They claimed, no, we were living on John Lennon's estate, but now we finally got a temple. I'll tell it later. And first we had a warehouse temple, but then we actually got a 5-story building right in the heart of London. Sam Mashinda was so visionary, he had a whole boatload of redwood. And he built the temple, and now it was time to zone it. And it was in a residential area, and this neighbor was complaining that every time we did the kirtan in the morning, that his wife would faint. And his dog would jump up and down and go, yip, 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 yip. So faint, yip, yip, yip. So he was complaining. So in the temple was a big door with a window in it, redwood door. And so here was our plan that when the door was open, we had a rousing kirtan. So here's the koto. Door open, door closed. Mridanga, boom, 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 boom. Door open, door closed. Door open, Haribo, door up, closed. I said, how can you say it's going through the wall? We can't even hear it in the hall. I said, his wife is fainting, your door's going yip, yip, yip. He said, it's a bloody trick. And he tries to get up, the doorknob comes off, he claws the door open, and 36 sleeping bags fall out in his own for 2. But because George Harrison was our guarantor, they said, okay. So these are some of the pastimes, and you know, I could actually leave this copy for you all to look at. But there's some beautiful, here's Jamuna. This was Malati and the Dancing Gopis. We did our gigs. We did the Republican and Democratic conventions. So these are the girls there.
Can I ask you a question? Why did Yamuna say that greeting in such a boisterous voice? Like, was there?
Well, maybe I exaggerated. She had a beautiful. I exaggerated it for the story.
Okay. I just thought maybe there was some sort of plan there, but
No.
It's the husband's perspective.
It was. What?
It's the
the
husband's
husband's perspective.
Yeah.
She had a great voice, strong voice.
George wanted to make her a rock star.
Yeah.
Prabhupada wanted to make her GBC, but she was interested in deity worship. Here's our wedding.
Wow. So young.
She had a Prabhupada's altar, and he's teaching us all deity worship. They covered it over, but I didn't have any shoes on. We went to Harinam with no shoes. Prabhupada made me wear shoes later on. No, I asked him in Vrindavan. I didn't wear any shoes, and it was hot. It's a temple. I shouldn't wear shoes, but I was looking for shady bushes and trees. So I walked like this. So then I asked him, should I wear shoes in the Holy Dham? He said, follow in the footsteps of the spiritual master. So then, I'm in Vishakhapatnam, Jamuna and Vishnu Chan. So Vishakhapatnam, and in India, you put one shoe on one side of the temple and one shoe on the other. So I run after Prabhupada, and there's barnacles, and he sees them walking gingerly. He says, where are your shoes? I said something like, when I'm with you, Prabhupada, I don't feel any pain. And he goes, are you still a hippie? So then he says, there's enough tapasya in the world without putting any more on yourself unnecessarily. So that's a good, including artificial renunciation and beating yourself up because you don't think you're doing great service. Krishna just wants us sincerely, try your best, you know. There's enough tapasya in the world. Here, Janice's taking his ticket, so he can't go. And he says, but they have my name in the airship, and she's frustrated, and he's laughing. That's crazy. You know, if you want, I can leave this copy for you all to look at in the temple. We have to, unfortunately, take orders for it, because the publisher didn't send me enough, but you can order it. So should I leave it here? Well, here?
I'll take two, sight unseen.
I'll take two.
Yeah, you can leave it with me. We'll make sure everybody gets them that wants to get them for sure. Remember, like we were talking before, like we'll get sent to Vancouver and yeah.
How long do we have to wait?
Not long.
As soon as we get back to San Francisco, probably about 12, 14 days, then I'm sending them.
They'll be arriving. They sent them late. The publisher. We tried to get them here, but the publisher didn't cooperate, so.
Any questions? Or, so I'll continue the story. I guess I'm here for a few days, so continue the great story. Even though it's just doing it, Prabhupada's doing it, and all of Prabhupada's wisdom. We're looking at art, and he said art means full belly. If people are starving or surviving, they can't appreciate art. If you're starving, they can't appreciate Krishna consciousness. So go feed everything. Punctuate it. Boom, boom. This lesson, this joke. So I will share what it's like to be with Prabhupada and Jamuna too, both of us. I mean, you know, all us men have the challenge, if we're married, that our wife loves two men more than us. Definitely Jamuna. After she met Prabhupada. Gurudas. She was deep, boy. I mean, scientifically speaking, if I have any devotional qualities, it was by osmosis from her spilling over to me. I was going to say a dog, but I love dogs, lower than a dog. By osmosis, I mean, as she got into it, and you know. Yeah, she's really special. Thank you very much.
You're also very special, Gurudas.